Thursday, my wife and I went out to Kennedy.
Oh, that's cool.
I went to Kennedy in 1975. And a few things have changed in the space program since But my dad was fascinated with the space program. My dad used to work on jet fighters.
Wow.
And so when the space program came into existence, he had just gotten out of the Air Force about the time the space program started.
Huh.
And so he was just super interested in it. And so because my dad was interested in it, you know, when I came along, I was interested in it. And so it was fun being back there, you know.
Yeah.
So Francine and I went out and did that. We had thought about if the weather was better, we were gonna get up and drive to Melbourne or Cocoa and watch sunrise, but we didn't get that done. But we did get over that.
It's been pretty gloomy the last couple of days. It's been pretty rainy and cloudy.
It's not good. I don't even need the rain.
That's true. It
It
hasn't rained here in a
for
long
so
time.
long. That and it gives me something to do at work.
Yeah, it hasn't rained in a while. But rain brings cold.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, so
Rain brings Florida cold. Not Tennessee cold. Florida cold.
but I do. I like, you know, I like getting around the area and seeing stuff. And one of the things I try to do in life, just in general, is I try to, when I travel, I try to create space to experience stuff. I don't want, you know, if I live to be an 80-year-old man, I do not want to be sitting around looking at flight ticket stubs of all these places I have been, and yet all I really know is classrooms and hotel rooms.
Yeah.
And I try to create space along the way to experience stuff. So always, like, take for example, if I have an academic meeting somewhere, instead of taking the last flight in that just barely gets me there in time for the meeting to start, a lot of times the first session will be in the evening. So instead of catching a 5 o'clock flight that gets me there at 6:45 in time for the 7 o'clock meeting, I'll try to create space where I can take the first flight in and spend some off time just kind of wandering around seeing stuff. So one time I had a meeting in Philadelphia. Could have caught the last flight in. Instead, I got up and caught a 5:45 a.m. flight in. You know. So that, you know, I was in and through Philadelphia before the morning rush really got bad. I drove up, spent most of the day at Princeton.
Oh, wow.
You know, just wandered around doing the Princeton thing. I'm kind of a nerd that way.
That'd be cool.
You know, went down and did some stuff in downtown Philly, did my meeting. Well, you know, to me, that's a pretty small price to pay. Get up early, you know, to do stuff like that. So, yeah, you know, so my wife and I went out to Kennedy yesterday. Did some stuff. I'll be in Phoenix week after next.
I was there 2 weeks ago.
Were you
Yeah, at CCD.
doing your interviewing for
Yeah,
residency?
I'm going to do the master's program next year.
Are you
Yes,
you
I
got
got
accepted
accepted
on
last
your
year.
residency?
Yeah.
Good.
I'm excited.
Well, I'll be seeing more of you then. I'll be seeing you out there.
That would be fun. It was a really cool experience. I really liked everything about their program, the area, the city. I really
Good.
liked it. It was
Yeah.
cool.
It's a good program. So I'll be out there, you know, and whenever we go, I'll try to take just a little bit of time to do something, you know? Maybe we just go up into the mountains north of Phoenix and check stuff out. We probably won't have time to do that on this trip, but like Brian, have you all had Brian Leslie in class?
Yes.
The youth ministry guy. Well, Brian's going with me on this trip. Joe's meeting us out there. He's actually got to leave early. We'll probably go to his son's game, you know, because they're in town. I looked it up, and I didn't know if he'd look it up or not. You know, he probably figures, you know, I'm a nerd and wouldn't want to do that stuff, so I thought I'd take the initiative since he's looked it up. His sons are playing the Wizards too. Joe's or have already flown to Vegas, you know. Tickets start at $10. Just thought I'd throw that out there. You know, you just got to do some stuff along the way. Doesn't have to cost money, but you got to do some stuff along the way. Otherwise, and like when Francine comes with me on these trips, I don't want her to experience the downside of my travel and never experiencing the upside. So I try to take her with me, you know, so I'm making her. She comes, kind of try to do something I might not otherwise do. Because it's not all particularly glamorous.
My fiance is the same way. She likes to go with her friend likes to audition for like The Voice or X Factor, America's Got Talent, stuff like that. And they'll travel all the way up to like Philadelphia and they'll go like a week early just so they can go and see the sights and stuff before they audition.
Yeah, yeah. That's good. All right. You know, we talked about the passion of the prophets, the seriousness of the prophets, the urgency of the prophets. You're going to preach from the prophets. It's got to be clear that there's something at stake, because these guys just aren't messing around. You can, to some degree, do what you can to try to let the text carry the sting. But you're not going to be able to totally remove your identification with the message. I mean, I was even taught, let the text carry the sting. Don't you try to carry the sting. You know, let the text carry the sting. Almost like, you know, spank with a ping pong paddle, not with your hand. You know. I understood the wisdom of the council, but I've just never found it to work all that well. Particularly because in this era, there's a lot more emphasis on recreating the dynamics of the genre itself, so that people experience the genre. And I think to do that, you've got to preach prophetically. Let me talk about that another way. One of the reasons I care so much about the genre issue we're talking about is because different genres persuade in different ways. Did I talk about that the first time we were together? Maybe. Why does God communicate the same basic ideas through so many different literary forms? Part of it is because different genres persuade differently. The prophets just grab you by the throat. They confront you, they embarrass you, they shame you. But other genre forms, you know, woo you with God's beauty or amaze you with God's majesty. Well, both are motivating us toward faithfulness, but they do so in different ways. Legal material is just as direct as can be. The Proverbs are far more observational and invitational. They both persuade, but they don't persuade the same way. I think this is the wisdom of God communicating through a vast array of literary types. But if you preach every sermon the same, you blur the differences. You blur the persuasion strategies. And it all just melds together into one undiscernible thing. If a sermon from the Proverbs sounds just like a sermon from Old Testament legal, if a sermon from a narrative text feels exactly the same as how you preach from the prophets and a judgment oracle, and some preachers, let's be honest, with some preachers it does. Some preachers are white hot passionate about everything, and everything comes on strong. Some preachers are conversational about everything. Well, you say, what's wrong with that? I'm conversational, or I'm white hot passionate. It's hard if every sermon is delivered exactly the same way for people to experience the variety that's in the text, because you're not bringing that to life. So I think having the ability to communicate with different emotional styles, different sermon structures, and from different types of texts is a part of how we capture really the diversity of persuasion through packaging that the Bible itself contains. So I want to encourage you to think, how can I bring this to life? At the same time, acknowledge that it's difficult because, among other things, the prophets, they don't just communicate directly, aggressively, confrontationally, but the prophets are also among the more sarcastic voices in the Bible. And some of us can appreciate that more than others. If you have a sense of humor that is, shall we say, underhydrated, got a dry, sarcastic sense of humor, and I am among them. So I really enjoy the prophets, even when they preach uncomfortable messages to me. I really appreciate the wit with which they communicate. But you know that sarcasm is among the least universally appreciated forms of humor. And so for some folks, it's just a lot harder to appreciate the prophets when the prophets are brought to life. But when I say that I enjoy the prophets, I don't mean that I enjoy the message. The prophets don't really make you giggle because they confront you. It's more that wry half grin, you got me, kind of receiving the wit, as compared to, wow, life of the party. So you're going to have to think about that, because especially those times when the prophets are communicating in a witty but sarcastic kind of way, how much do you really try to point that out? How much do you really try, instead of just pointing it out, to recreate the environment? And in some ways, what I'll sometimes do to give myself some margin is, today we're in this particular text, and you know what? This is a really challenging text. It's a tough one. But I really believe that all of us, myself included, need to experience this text the way the prophet's audience experienced the text. And so what I'm going to do tonight, in an effort to serve you and serve God well, through the preaching of this text is I'm going to try to bring it to life for you. Fasten your seatbelts here. So that way people don't misunderstand, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't just come up, wow, what did Snell have for breakfast? And so I think that can be a helpful way to set the stage for doing what the prophet does the way the prophet's doing it. Whereas if you just come out on stage and do a first-person narrative, which actually another approach might be a first-person narrative, where you sort of dress up like a biblical character, because then it's not just, wow, what happened to Austin? You know, dude's really fired up today. If it's obvious that you're doing a first-person narrative, you can recreate it a little bit more, and you're a little removed from the equation.
Yeah.
So I think that can help.
Take a lot of steam out of it, that way.
Maybe a good time for object lessons, since a lot of times they're in the text itself. And it's interesting, you do see the prophets as people come out. The language of Isaiah and the language of Amos aren't the same. The analogies and illustrations aren't the same. Amos is a backwoods farmer.